Hello and welcome back to South Park Explained on No Bullshit. Today we're talking about the latest and greatest episode of our favorite cartoon comedy show, and it's called Let Them Eat Goo. This episode not only continues with the Tegrity Farms intro and storyline, but also Eric Cartman makes a return as a main character here as well. In the beginning, Randy Marsh sits down at the kitchen table with his family in what quickly turns into a meeting about their Tegrity Farms business, which is currently having some financial issues. After vowing to no longer take money from the corporate Chinese government, which happened in last episode, well, now Randy is looking for new ways to increase their profits to replace that lost communist income. The family is little help here though, as Stan is not making many suggestions at all. The mom, Sharon Marsh, does smartly point out that they could be making more money if they didn't spend so much on parades and advertising, another reference to what happened last week. But Randy mostly ignores this salient point though, and he decides to go with Towley's idea instead. Towley points out that the farm is wasting a lot of their plant products by throwing away the sticks and stems and lesser parts of their plants. Instead of ditching those green scraps though, they can instead try and sell them to someone else. The first idea is to sell them as mulch for other people and farmers to use to grow their own plants, but later on, this team discovers they have a much better idea for what to do with their leftover plants. Before we get too ahead of ourselves though, and before we get to that part, let's first check out the second plot line of this episode, which starts off with Cartman and Butters at school getting excited for their lunch break. They happily chant and even do a little dance because they are clearly pumped up because it's Sloppy Joe Day. Their joy is short-lived here though, because when they reach the front of the food line, they're served fish instead of the dish they were hoping for. The lunch lady explains that the school has been forced to get more healthy and quote-unquote sustainable, and this obviously does not go over well with Cartman and Butters. In fact, Cartman takes the news so poorly, he eventually freaks out in the lunchroom in front of everyone, even falling to the ground, grabbing his chest and seemingly having a heart attack. And this lunchroom section of the story quickly reminds me of two real-world issues. First, this seems to hark back to years ago when liberals like Michelle Obama tried to make school lunches more healthy for some dumb reason. They claimed to be trying to help the children, but I think a lot of us saw it as just a way for them to virtue signal. And also, it kind of just looked like Michelle was getting bored as First Lady, so she needed something to do to keep her busy and to get her extra attention. Next, this whole switching off of meat here at South Park School, this also reminds me of the more recent anti-meat movements being pushed by modern left-wingers these days. They are trying to change everyone into vegetarians or vegans now, claiming it can help save the world or some other bullshit. But as you'll soon see in this South Park episode, usually the people claiming you should change your diet to save the world, supposedly, well, they're actually just making that case so you will buy their preferred food products instead, sometimes even so they can make money off these new food products. Climate change is also brought up as a reason to eat less meat here, and vegans are mentioned as well, and also saving the animals is referenced too. And while these goals all sound fine and dandy and seem noble on the surface, later in this episode we quickly find out that the people propagating those premises actually have ulterior motives, and they don't tend to care about what they claim at all. Back to Randy and Tally now though, who are now driving a truckload of their plant scraps to try and sell them to save their business. They get hungry on their way though, and decide to stop at Burger King for a snack. There, Randy sees advertisements for Burger King's new Impossible Whopper, and when he asks the worker what's up with that, well, I think you could probably see where this thing is going. For those who don't know, Impossible Whoppers are the new signature product from Burger King that everyone is talking about right now too. They aren't your average Whopper or cheeseburger though, as instead of using real beef from a cow, the Impossible Whopper actually uses fake meat. It's a veggie burger patty basically, that's been highly processed and flavored to try and taste like the regular Whopper does. In South Park, Randy even tries to eat one here and notes right away that it tastes like shit. He keeps eating it anyway though, and then he immediately starts seeing dollar signs in his head too. As you might have suspected, now Randy has a new idea of what to do with his once discarded plant scraps. He's not going to use them for mulch anymore. He's going to use those scraps to cook up some veggie burgers of his own and sell these vegetarian options for would-be food buyers in South Park. He also even copies Burger King's marketing gimmicks right away too, saying these veggie burgers, which he now calls Tegrity burgers named after his farm, well, he claims they are not only healthier and vegan friendly, they're also better for the environment, and they're made with sustainable ingredients too. This of course is all a marketing ploy though, and it's being done much the same way it's done in the real world. Really, the people selling you on going vegan or eating these fake meat substitutes, they're doing it for their own selfish and often nefarious reasons. Anyone who believes companies like Burger King or politicians like Alexander Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez actually care about the environment and saving the world, well, they're just too ignorant to understand the truth. The truth is, they're all playing us, guys. Veggie-pushing food companies just want to make money, as do crooked politicians who also want to use the threat of global extinction as a way to sway voters to their side, giving these politicians more power, influence, and eventually more money too. More money to line their pockets, all being done by claiming to save the world. Next, Cartman returns to school in a wheelchair now, still wearing his hospital gown too. Immediately upon his arrival, Eric starts to argue with the pro-sustainable lunch crowd, which mostly includes more left-leaning girls from the school, and also one small boy who's a vegan who even wears a shirt that labels him as such. Pretty fitting too, since real vegans do love to tell everyone about their diet preferences in real life too. And in addition, another reference here comes up when Cartman continues to argue with the pro-sustainable lunch group. Cartman of course argues for his right to have lunches the way they've always been, with real meat, and the others cry about wanting things to be sustainable, veggie, and vegan as well, claiming it will save the world and shit. The vegan kid even says he has a right to his own freedom of speech too, to which Cartman kind of agrees, but also he noticeably says he has freedom of speech, but they should think about the consequences of their speech too. And this is a pretty subtle reference to recent controversy surrounding basketball player LeBron James. This NBA star just got through some drama himself, which he started by saying something similar. This was when LeBron defended China on behalf of the NBA. LeBron basically kowtowed to the communists, fearing he would lose profits speaking out against them or supporting those who do. This basically is what Cartman is representing here, because he's trying to support freedom of speech, but at the same time he isn't, and it's getting him into a bit of a kerfuffle. And this low-key allusion to LeBron James in this South Park episode shows that they're still in the know and they're still fighting the good fight against the Middle Kingdom in Asia. But at the same time, South Park is being very tactful about it too, and they're not trying to overly preach and beat this message over our heads either, which is a nice touch. Next, Randy takes his new veggie Tegrity burgers out to sell to people in South Park. He hilariously sets up a stand right outside of the Burger King too, much to the chagrin of its employee. Back at the school now, Cartman happily eats his meat-filled lunch, which has returned, but the pro-sustainability crowd, led by Wendy, they continue to protest meat products out in the open in the name of climate change and other BS reasons, which were likely put into their heads by the liberal mainstream media and corrupt politicians who have been indoctrinating children and the public like this for ages. Can't help but think Wendy might represent Greta Thunberg here a bit. Then, in response to their protest, Cartman gets so up in arms about this and the thought of losing his meat lunch again that he ends up having a second heart attack, getting carted off to the hospital once again too. Then, a new character enters the show in the next scene. A school assembly has been called to try and handle the school lunch situation. Their PC principal introduces the founder of Incredible Meat, who is there to propose a solution for this whole lunch crisis. And since he's called this later on, let's go ahead and call this founder guy the Goo Man, since his suggestion here is to use his company's new product, which they themselves describe as goo. They say they will use this plant-based goo, which has been heavily produced and scientifically created in labs, to be used as a substitute for all meat products. And this speech from the Goo Man comes off as rather creepy and ominous, with scary kind of music coming up behind it and everything. And this really goes to show how sketchy and devious these plant-based meat substitute making companies really are. Sure, they hide behind noble causes and they pretend to be saving the world, but really, they're just crooked salesmen using fear and propaganda to make themselves rich. In addition, it turns out this Goo Man character is a bit of a parody of characters and plot themes from the famous and award-winning movie There Will Be Blood from 2007. This parody becomes pretty obvious when the Goo Man insists on calling one of his new minions HW later on, which is also the name of a character from that movie. And in addition, basically, South Park just swapped out the product from that film, which was oil, and made it into what they call goo here, which is plant-based protein substitute. The Goo Man also wears old-timey clothes like from There Will Be Blood, and he even smokes an old-school pipe, much like the main character, which was played by Daniel Day-Lewis. The Goo Man's plans work here too, as South Park's school ends up buying his goo and putting it into their lunch products in place of meat. They decide to not tell Cartman they're going to do this though, hoping he won't notice the difference when he eats the food. And funny enough, it actually works at first. Cartman doesn't even realize he's eating meat substitute goo for a couple of lunches too, until later on when his friend Butters decides to break the news to him because he can't keep lying to his friend anymore. Back to Randy's storyline first though, he's now giving a speech too, his being in front of a town meeting with the adults. Randy's trying to sell the town on the environmental problems with eating meat, crying about climate change and other nonsense excuses these activist types always preach about. And then, conveniently enough, at the end of his anti-meat tirade, Randy then offers an alternative to meat, his veggie Tegrity burgers. And this scene clearly shows how corrupt these so-called environmentalists really are. They claim to be saving the world, and they say that's why people need to stop eating meat, but really, as we can see here clearly, they're doing all this pushing of anti-meat propaganda so they can quickly pivot and try and sell you something that fits into that whole narrative that they've been building up this whole time. In this case, plant-based meat substitutes. Randy's plan inevitably works though, as he ends up even opening his own Tegrity Burgers store. This prompts backlash from the cow farmers though, who even come to Randy's plant farm complaining that they can't sell their cow beef anymore. This farmer here even gets so upset, he sends all his unsold cows over to Randy's farm, telling Randy that they're his problem now because he can't sell them anymore because everyone's eating plant burgers instead. The cows eventually take over Tegrity Farm pretty quickly too, threatening to shut down Randy's whole operation. Him getting desperate here, Randy and Tally then think of a way to get rid of the cows. They decide they're just going to kill them themselves, secretly overnight. This leads to a pretty hilarious scene of the two taking out all the cows in a pretty bloody and very violent sequence. And this scene also, of course, is an over-the-top way to show that people that preach about the environment and saving the animals like what Randy did earlier, well, they really, at the end of the day, don't actually care about animal life as much as they claim, if they even care about it at all. Next, after Cartman discovers he's not been eating meat again, he decides to meet with the so-called Goo Man himself. They all convene at the local Burger King, a store which has become under the Goo Man's thumb now, much like how South Park School has. And here's where we get the Goo Man giving that HW reference from There Will Be Blood too, which we mentioned earlier. And also, Cartman seems to be pissed off and vows to have a final word with his school over this whole veggie meat situation. Also, the Goo Man is revealed to be in cahoots with the cow farmer who complained to Randy at Tegrity Farms earlier, and they appear to have a plan to shut down the Tegrity Burgers operation so the Goo Man can become the only fake meat seller in town. This plan unfolds in the next scene when we see Randy being interviewed on television. There, the reporter starts confronting Randy about his new product and business angle. Next, they reveal they have video footage of Randy and Towley taking out all those cows earlier. This was obviously all set up by the Goo Man, who's proven to be just as sinister as he seemed right from the beginning. He's also a direct reflection of the fake meat industry and how they don't really care about health and saving the world like how they claim. That's just a plot on their side, trying to sell more products and trying to attain their real goal of making lots of money. In the end, the final scene sees Cartman confronting all the kids at school, who tricked him into eating fake meat for a while now. But Eric doesn't act mad or pissed off like how you would think. He actually pulls a bit of a reverse psychology move on everyone here, claiming he actually loves the fake meat now because it's just as gross and processed and filled with chemicals as the real meat, which he actually prefers. This of course is true in South Park and true in the real world as well, particularly in South Park, since this is what the Goo Man just told Eric previously. People think these fake, faux, so-called incredible meats or impossible Whoppers, well, they think because they're vegetarian and have fancy names, that makes people think they're actually healthier and more natural, when in reality it's quite the contrary. So with that in mind, Cartman plays the part of becoming a fake meat supporter here, which actually makes Wendy and the sustainability pro-veggie crowd realize they weren't right about this fake meat stuff at all. All in all, this week we saw another classic South Park episode, and while it might be somewhat overshadowed by some of the other greater hits earlier this season, particularly the now world famous Banned in China episode, but this one, Let Them Eat Goo, still gets the job done well. Here, South Park tackles another current hot button issue, and they completely tear it apart too, albeit in a more subtle, nuanced way that might not make as big a headlines as other stories have. But regardless, here, South Park took impossible Whoppers and the fake meat industry, they took them down, while also subtly attacking LeBron James and the NBA once again, which resulted in South Park also still low-key standing up to China as well too. What do you guys think? Do you see impossible Whoppers differently now? Were any of you fans of this faux meat stuff before? If you do like it, do you also believe eating veggie burgers will save the world, like what's presented in this episode and sometimes in the real world too? Comment your thoughts on everything below, and thanks for watching No Bullshit. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see y'all next time.